Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Earth. Wherever you find yourself tonight, whether in the stillness of midnight, the quiet before dawn, or perhaps in the soft hum of an afternoon rest, this is a space where curiosity can wander gently. A space where questions too large for the noise of the day can be held quietly, almost like secrets whispered to the night. Tonight, we turn toward a question both strange and familiar. What if Earth itself is alive? Not alive in the simple sense of hosting life, but alive in a deeper way. What if this planet, the very ground beneath us, the seas that surround us, the air we breathe, has its own kind of awareness, its own kind of consciousness? For most of human history, this has not been such a radical idea. Ancient cultures worldwide spoke of the earth as a mother, a spirit, and a being in her own right. From the fertile goddess Gaia in Greece to in the Andes, to countless stories carried in indigenous traditions, the idea of a living earth was once the common thread of our understanding. Only in more recent centuries have we shifted toward seeing our world as an object, a rock in space, a stage for human drama rather than a participant in it. And yet, when we pause and listen closely, when we notice the patterns of wind and water, the steady rhythms of seasons, the delicate balance of climate and chemistry, questions begin to rise again. Is this merely a collection of accidents, or something more? Are we living upon a vast organism, one that breathes through its forests, circulates through its oceans, and even dreams through the countless lives it sustains? This journey tonight will not seek certainty, but wonder. We will move slowly through science and myth, through history and imagination. We will consider how Earth behaves, how it remembers, how it endures, and how it changes. And we will hold both perspectives, what we know and what we dare to dream, side by side. So settle in, allow your thoughts to soften. For the next little while, we will step gently into one of the oldest, most beautiful possibilities of all, that the earth beneath us is not silent stone, but a living, conscious companion in the story of the universe. We have wondered what the earth truly is. Before there were satellites and telescopes, before maps or microscopes, there was simply the direct experience of living on this vast and mysterious ground. And for countless generations, that experience carried with it the sense that Earth was not only alive, but aware. In ancient Greece, she was Gaia, primal mother, born at the dawn of existence, who gave rise to mountains, oceans, and gods alike. To the Greeks, Earth was not a silent backdrop, but a parent, a living origin from which all things emerged. Every stone, every river, every harvest was in some way a reflection of her presence. Travel across the oceans to the Andes, and you would find Pachamama, the Earth Mother who nourished, who demanded respect, and who, when ignored, could withhold her gifts. Farmers would leave offerings of food and drink in the soil before planting, as if acknowledging that they were in partnership with a living being who made their survival possible. To work the land without such recognition was seen not just as foolish, but as a violation of a sacred relationship. In India, the earth was Bhumi Devi, the goddess of soil and fertility, sustaining all forms of life. Ancient hymns described her patience, her strength, her endurance. She carried the weight of human actions, good and bad alike. Much like a mother quietly holding the burdens of her children. And in countless indigenous traditions across the world, from the First Nations of North America to the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, Earth was not an object, but a relative. She was mother, a being with whom one could speak, listen, and exchange gifts. Rocks and rivers, winds and animals were all part of this extended kinship network. To harm Earth was to harm family, but to honor Earth was to honor one's own bloodline. What unites these traditions is not uniformity, but resonance. Across continents, languages, and eras, humans arrived at a similar intuition that the world itself was alive. This was not a metaphor, but reality. Earth breathed in the forests, spoke in the thunder, and dreamed in the stars. Contrast this with the modern scientific worldview, which only in recent centuries has begun to frame Earth as inanimate matter, rock orbiting a star, a stage for the drama of human life rather than a participant in it. The shift was subtle but profound. Where once Earth was seen as a conscious being, she became instead a resource, something to be studied, measured, and used. And yet, something in us resists that purely mechanical view. Myths are rarely discarded completely. They linger in language, in ritual, in the way we instinctively speak of Mother Earth, even in casual conversation. On some deep level, perhaps we still feel what our ancestors once knew, that we are not separate from the Earth, but bound to her in ways too intimate to reduce to data and equations. The ancient view reminds us that to call Earth alive is not necessarily to impose human traits upon her, but to recognize the subtle patterns of relationship that have always been present. The rains that nourish, the storms that warn, the soil that feeds, all of these were once understood as expressions of personality, as gestures from a being greater than ourselves. Even today, when we stand before a vast mountain range or walk through a dense forest, there is often a moment of silence that arises within us, unbidden. Something about the scale, the depth, and the quiet majesty evokes reverence. In that pause, in that deep breath, we may be touching the same intuition that guided our ancestors. The sense that the Earth is not just landscape, but presence. The stories they told were not primitive misunderstandings of science, but attempts to honor that presence. They gave names and faces to forces we now call geology, weather, or ecology. But in doing so, they preserved something that modern language often forgets, a recognition of Earth as partner, not object. To listen to these voices of the past is to step into a slower rhythm of thought, one that blurs the line between myth and reality. It is to sit around the fires of ancient villages, to hear the chants and prayers carried by generations, and to feel, even for a moment, what it was like to live in a world where Earth was undeniably alive. Perhaps the question is not whether those ancient people were right or wrong, but whether they were sensing something we have simply learned to overlook. For if Earth truly is alive, she has always been alive. Then these old stories are not relics of superstition, but whispers of truth, waiting for us to hear them again. When we ask whether Earth itself could be alive, we are first confronted with a more basic question. What does it actually mean to be alive? It may seem simple. At first, life is all around us, in trees and animals, in the breath we take, even in the smallest invisible microbes. And yet, when scientists try to define life in precise terms, the answer becomes far less clear. In biology, life is often described as a set of shared characteristics. Living things grow. They change in response to their environment. They consume energy, and they excrete waste. They reproduce, ensuring that their kind continues. And perhaps, most intriguingly, they maintain balance, what scientists call homeostasis. This balance is not static, but dynamic. Organisms constantly adjust themselves to survive in changing conditions. Take, for example, a simple cell. It draws in nutrients, it processes energy, it repairs damage, and it divides, passing its structure into the next generation. Now compare that to a towering oak tree. It pushes roots deep into the ground, draws water upward, captures sunlight in its leaves, and over centuries becomes a living monument. Both the cell and the oak are alive, though their forms could not be more different. If we hold these criteria in our hands, gently, and then turn them toward the Earth itself, what do we see? The planet certainly grows not in size, but in cycles of mountains rising and eroding, continents drifting and colliding. It responds to its environment, shifting climates in response to forces from space, like the tilt of its axis or the brightness of its star. It consumes energy in the form of sunlight, which fuels winds and waves, forests and food chains. It even excretes in volcanic eruptions and chemical outflows into the oceans. What about reproduction? At first glance, this may seem like the point where the analogy falters. Earth does not create another Earth, at least not in the way a bird lays an egg. And yet, some thinkers have wondered, do planets reproduce not by splitting apart, but by seeding life into the cosmos? Through asteroids carrying bacteria, through fragments of atmosphere drifting outward, could Earth's influence extend beyond itself, much as a dandelion scatters its seeds into the wind? And then there is homeostasis. Perhaps nowhere does Earth resemble a living being more strongly than here. The planet maintains temperatures that allow liquid water to persist, despite the changing brightness of the sun over billions of years. Its atmosphere balances oxygen and carbon dioxide in ratios finely tuned for complex life. When an imbalance arises, new systems often emerge to correct it: forests absorbing excess carbon, or ocean currents redistributing heat. It is not perfection, but a kind of resilience. By these measures, Earth begins to resemble not merely a home for life, but a living system in its own right. But beyond biology lies a more elusive quality: consciousness. Is being alive enough, or must we also be aware? For humans, consciousness is the vivid experience of the world, the ability not just to exist, but to know we exist. Could Earth, too, in some vast and unrecognizable way, have awareness? Philosophers have long debated the nature of consciousness. Some argue it arises only in brains, complex networks of neurons firing in intricate patterns. Others suggest it may be a more fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or light, present everywhere, but expressed differently in each form. If the latter is true, then perhaps Earth's interconnected systems, oceans, forests, atmosphere, geology form a kind of neural network on a planetary scale. Of course, mainstream science hesitates here. To speak of planetary awareness is to step into metaphor, into poetry. And yet, there is value in metaphor, especially when it helps us see with fresh eyes. When we call Earth a living being, we are not merely anthropomorphizing. We are exploring the possibility that our categories of alive and not alive are far narrower than reality requires. Consider viruses. For decades, scientists argued over whether they were alive. They cannot reproduce without hijacking a host cell, and yet they evolve, they adapt, they spread. Are they alive, or are they something else entirely? Even at the smallest scales, the line blurs. Perhaps the same is true at the largest scale. Perhaps planets and stars exist in a realm beyond our neat definitions. In many ways, asking whether Earth is alive is less about finding a final answer and more about reawakening wonder, to see a thunderstorm not only as weather, but as a pulse of planetary energy. To feel the tide not only as water moving under the moon's pull, but as Earth's circulatory rhythm. To recognize that the categories we use, living, non-living, may be inventions of our own limited perspective. And so we arrive at a threshold. The question, what does it mean to be alive, does not close, but opens. It invites us into wider possibilities. For if Earth meets many of the criteria of life, and perhaps even hints at forms of awareness beyond our imagination, then we must ask, how do we live differently upon such a being? How do we care for it, respect it, or even listen to it? The ancients spoke of Earth as alive, not because they misunderstood science, but because they felt a truth our modern categories often exclude, and science itself, when viewed closely, provides evidence that may support their intuition. Between these two perspectives, myth and measurement, there lies a fertile ground, one we will explore further as we turn to the Gaia Hypothesis, the idea that Earth not only sustains life, but is life. In the 1970s, as humanity was just beginning to see its home planet from space, the swirling blues and greens of Earth suspended in darkness, an unusual idea began to take root. British scientist James Lovelock, working alongside microbiologist Lynn Martin, proposed that Earth might not simply host life, but function as life. They called it the Gaia Hypothesis, after the ancient Greek goddess of Earth at its heart. The Gaia Hypothesis suggests something both simple and profound. The Earth behaves like a self-regulating organism. The atmosphere, the oceans, the soil, and the countless forms of life are not separate pieces, but interwoven parts of a vast system that sustains balance. Just as your body maintains temperature, blood pressure, and chemical levels, the Earth, too, may maintain the conditions necessary for life. Think for a moment of our atmosphere. Oxygen makes up about 21% of the air we breathe. Not too high, not too low. If oxygen levels were significantly higher, wildfires would sweep across continents with unstoppable force. If they were lower, complex life, as we know it, could not survive. And yet, over hundreds of millions of years, despite volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and mass extinctions, Earth has held this delicate balance. How? According to the Gaia perspective, it is not chance, but regulation. Plants and algae produce oxygen through photosynthesis. Animals consume it and release carbon dioxide. Microbes recycle nutrients through soil and water. These countless interactions form feedback loops, much like the systems within a body. When one factor changes, another shifts to restore equilibrium. The oceans tell a similar story. Currents transport heat around the globe, redistributing energy, like blood vessels moving warmth through a body. Marine life absorbs carbon dioxide, while deep-sea processes bury it into the Earth's crust. Together, these actions stabilize the planet's climate, even as external conditions fluctuate. For Lovelock and Margulis, these were not just metaphors. They argued that Earth itself could be viewed as a single vast organism, one in which life and environment are inseparable. The soil is alive, not just with minerals, but with bacteria that cycle nutrients. Forests are alive not just as trees, but as climate-regulating engines. Life does not merely adapt to Earth. It actively shapes Earth in ways that allow more life to flourish. Of course, this idea challenged traditional science. Critics pointed out that feedback systems do not necessarily imply purpose or consciousness. To say that Earth regulates itself risks making it sound intentional, as though the planet were choosing to maintain balance. Skeptics argued that natural selection explains these processes. Organisms that stabilize their environment survive, while those that destabilize it do not. The result may look like planetary regulation, but it could simply be the byproduct of evolutionary competition. Yet the Gaia Hypothesis endured, not just because it offered explanations, but because it reshaped perspective. It encouraged scientists to study Earth as a system, rather than as isolated parts. Today, the field of Earth system science owes much to this shift. We now understand climate, geology, biology, and atmosphere not as separate disciplines, but as interwoven dynamics. Even in mainstream science, echoes of Gaia remain. Researchers describe the Earth system as if it were a living body with feedback, thresholds, and resilience. NASA itself has used the phrase Earth as a system in describing its climate models. While most scientists stop short of calling Earth alive, many now see the value of studying it as though it were beyond science. The Gaia hypothesis resonates deeply with spiritual and cultural traditions. For those who have long spoken of Earth as a living being, Lovelock and Margolis offered not proof, but a bridge, a way for modern thought to reconnect with ancient intuition. To view Earth as Gaia is to see our relationship not as dominion, but as kinship. This framing also invites a gentle humility. If Earth is alive, then we are not its masters, but its Celestini parts of a greater whole. Just as no cell commands the body, no species commands the planet. Our well-being is bound to the health of the larger system, whether we acknowledge it or not. But Gaia also carries a shadow. If Earth behaves like an organism, then perhaps it can also experience illness. Rising carbon levels, collapsing ecosystems, melting ice could these be symptoms of imbalance, warning signs of a system under stress. Lovelock himself, later in life, warned that Gaia might be shifting into a less hospitable state, much as a fever changes the chemistry of the human body. Still, the Gaia hypothesis is not doom, but wonder. It invites us to imagine Earth not as inert matter, but as a living presence, to think of forests as lungs, rivers as veins, storms as the nervous impulses of a vast organism. It is not about reducing science to poetry, but about allowing science and poetry to meet, to expand the ways we see. Consider the blue marble photograph taken by Apollo astronauts in 1972. For many, it was the first time humanity saw Earth as a whole, small, fragile, radiant against the blackness. That image alone shifted perspectives, fueling environmental movements and a sense of shared belonging. The Gaia hypothesis added words to that vision, giving language to the intuition that our planet is not simply an object, but a living system, worthy of respect. The truth of Gaia may not lie in whether Earth is literally alive in the same sense as an animal. Rather, it lies in how the idea reframes our imagination. To act as if Earth is alive changes the way we live upon it. It fosters reverence, stewardship, and a sense of belonging. And in that shift of consciousness, Gaia becomes real not as a scientific fact alone, but as a lived truth. And so, as we continue this journey, we step deeper into the mystery. If Earth is indeed a living system, then perhaps it carries memory recorded not in stories or books, but in stone, ice, and oceans. Just as a mind remembers its past, might Earth remember its own. When we speak of memory, we usually mean the fragile traces stored in human minds, moments replayed, names recalled, places revisited in thought. Yet Earth, too, carries memory, though not in neurons or in words. Her memory is written in stone, in ice, in oceans, and in the quiet layers that have accumulated over billions of years. These records do not speak quickly, but with patience. They require not ears, but eyes and instruments. And yet, when we learn to read them, they tell stories far older and deeper than anything preserved in our own species' recollections. Every mountain is a memory. Each ridge and peak holds the history of collisions between continents, of ancient seas raised into sky-high summits. To a geologist, a cliff face is a library. Bands of color, mark shifting climates, sudden upheavals, slow transformations. The folds and fractures in the rock are not random. They are sentences written in the grammar of tectonics. And just as we remember joy or sorrow, Earth remembers impacts and upheavals. The scars of asteroid strikes, the echoes of volcanic eruptions, all remain embedded in her surface. In polar ice, the memories are even more delicate. Layer by layer, snowfall has pressed down through the ages, trapping tiny bubbles of air. These bubbles are time capsules, snapshots of the atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago. By drilling deep into glaciers, scientists have uncovered the whispers of past climates, the rise and fall of carbon dioxide, the rhythm of ice ages, the breath of forests long vanished. Earth remembers her own breathing, her own pulse, captured in frozen archives. Beneath the oceans, sediments accumulate like pages stacked one atop the other. Dust, shells, volcanic ash drift downward and settle quietly onto the seafloor. Over millennia, they harden into rock, preserving fossils and chemical traces. Each layer holds clues, the sudden disappearance of species marking mass extinctions, or the gradual change in isotopes telling of warmer seas. Earth keeps these records, not in one place, but across the globe, like a mind storing different memories in different regions of the brain. Some memories are of endings, the Permian extinction, when nearly all life was wiped away. The Cretaceous impact, when fire and darkness fell after the asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs. Others are of rebirth, new life rising in strange forms, ecosystems weaving themselves anew after catastrophe. In these patterns of collapse and renewal, Earth remembers the fragility of life and its resilience. But memory is not only a record, it is also continuity. Just as a person's memories shape who they are, Earth's memories shape the present. The carbon cycles of today are influenced by choices made in deep time, when plants first learned to draw down carbon and bury it beneath the ground. The oxygen we breathe is a gift from ancient algae, which once transformed the atmosphere. We live inside Earth's memory, whether we realize it or not, and here we may step gently into speculation. If memory is the preservation of information, and if Earth preserves her history in stones, ice, oceans, and fossils, then is this not a form of memory, however vast and slow? To us, memory feels personal, conscious, alive. But perhaps Earth's memory is something different, not fleeting impressions, but deep imprints that endure across eons. If we imagine Earth as a living entity, then her memory is not fragile, but monumental, not fleeting, but enduring. Still, one might ask, does memory require awareness? Does Earth know what she remembers? Perhaps not in any human sense. Yet, when shifting climates respond to cycles written millions of years ago, when tectonic plates follow patterns etched into the mantle, it is hard not to feel that the past is speaking, still guiding the present. In this way, memory is not just stored, it is alive in action, woven into the ongoing life of the planet. To look at Earth in this way is to shift perspective. Instead of seeing the ground beneath us as inert, we see it as layered with stories. Each stone a word in an epic too vast for a single lifetime to contain. Instead of seeing ice as lifeless, we see it as a breathing archive, holding in its silence the songs of ancient air. Earth's memory is not only science, it is also something we feel in quiet moments, standing before a canyon carved over millions of years, or walking across fossils imprinted in stone. There is a hush that arises, a sense of entering a cathedral not built by hands but by time. In those moments, we touch the edges of Earth's deep remembering. And so, when we ask whether Earth might be conscious, we must first recognize that she already remembers. Her memory is etched across the planet, vast and patient. If consciousness requires memory, then perhaps Earth carries that foundation already. As we leave this section, let us hold this thought gently. We are not the first to walk upon this memory. Every breath, every stone, every drop of water carries traces of what came before. Earth is not only our home, it is also the keeper of its own past. To listen to her memory is to remember that we, too, are part of her unfolding story. When we speak of a mind, we often imagine neurons firing in a brain, carrying thoughts, dreams, and memories. But what if the mind is not confined to a skull? What if awareness could emerge wherever networks become complex enough, whether in the firing of neurons, the flow of rivers, or the interconnected patterns of life itself? Could Earth, in her vastness, show signs of something like a planetary mind? To explore this question, we must first ask, what are the hallmarks of a mind? Scientists and philosophers often describe it in terms of perception, memory, response, and self-regulation. A mind perceives, gathering information from its surroundings. A mind remembers, carrying the past into the present. A mind responds, not mechanically, but adaptively. And a mind, at least in its higher forms, holds some degree of self-awareness. Already, Earth seems to meet some of these criteria. She perceives through forests that sense the changing seasons, through oceans that register shifts in heat, through atmospheric systems that detect and react to subtle changes in composition. She remembers in rocks, ice, and sediments, as we explored in the last section. She responds, shaping climates, cycling nutrients, adjusting balances to sustain life. And as for awareness, here we reach mystery, a place where speculation begins. One possible sign of a planetary mind is communication across systems. In the human brain, neurons speak to each other with electrical impulses, creating networks of information. On Earth, forests communicate through mycorrhizal networks, the so-called wood wide web, where fungi and roots share signals, nutrients, and even warnings. Oceans, too, connect distant regions through currents, carrying not just heat, but information encoded in chemical and biological flows. Storm systems transfer energy and matter across continents. In this web of interactions, we glimpse something like neural activity, though slower and broader. Another sign is emergent behavior. A single ant is simple, but a colony acts with astonishing coordination, building structures and solving problems. Could Earth, likewise, display emergent intelligence, not from a single organism, but from the combined activity of all? Some researchers describe the biosphere as a kind of superorganism, countless species interwoven in a dance that, while not conscious in the human sense, achieves balance and resilience as though guided by intention. Consider, for example, how Earth regulates temperature. Despite changes in the sun's brightness over billions of years, Earth has kept conditions suitable for life. This is not a coincidence. Geological cycles, atmospheric chemistry, and biological processes interact in ways that stabilize the climate. To some, this looks like the action of a planetary thermostat. To others, it is a sign of something deeper in intelligence, embedded in the planet's very fabric. But what of self-awareness? Could Earth know herself? This is more difficult to imagine. Yet, some thinkers suggest that humanity itself may serve as Earth's reflective capacity. Just as your mind is composed of countless cells, none of which are individually aware of the whole. Perhaps we humans are like neurons in a planetary brain. Through our science, art, and imagination, Earth begins to look back at herself, to contemplate her own nature. If so, then our role is not separate from the planetary mind, but part of its unfolding awareness. Critics, of course, caution against pushing metaphors too far. Earth does not think in words or images. There is no central brain, no single seat of consciousness. What we call planetary mind may simply be the natural result of complex systems interacting. But even this is remarkable, for complexity itself can give rise to intelligence, as seen in artificial neural networks today. Perhaps awareness is not a singular phenomenon, but a spectrum, and Earth lies somewhere along it. The possibility of a planetary mind also resonates with ancient traditions. Many cultures have spoken of Earth as a being not only alive, but mindful. Indigenous stories describe the land as a teacher, the mountains as keepers of wisdom, and the rivers as voices. These are not scientific claims. Yet, they carry truths about relationships and awareness that modern science is only beginning to approach. And so, as we continue this journey, we step deeper into the mystery. If Earth is indeed a living system, then perhaps it carries memory recorded not in stories or books, but in stone, ice, and oceans. Just as a mind remembers its past, might Earth remember its own. When we speak of memory, we usually mean the fragile traces stored in human minds, moments replayed, names recalled, places revisited in thought. Yet Earth, too, carries memory, though not in neurons or in words. Her memory is written in stone, in ice, in oceans, and in the quiet layers that have accumulated over billions of years. These records do not speak quickly, but with patience. They require not ears, but eyes and instruments. And yet, when we learn to read them, they tell stories far older and deeper than anything preserved in our own species' recollections. Every mountain is a memory. Each ridge and peak holds the history of collisions between continents, of ancient seas raised into sky-high summits. To a geologist, a cliff face is a library. Bands of color mark shifting climates, sudden upheavals, slow transformations. The folds and fractures in the rock are not random. They are sentences written in the grammar of tectonics. And just as we remember joy or sorrow, Earth remembers impacts and upheavals. The scars of asteroid strikes, the echoes of volcanic eruptions, all remain embedded in her surface. In polar ice, the memories are even more delicate. Layer by layer, snowfall has pressed down through the ages, trapping tiny bubbles of air. These bubbles are time capsules, snapshots of the atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago. By drilling deep into glaciers, scientists have uncovered the whispers of past climates, the rise and fall of carbon dioxide, the rhythm of ice ages, the breath of forests long vanished. Earth remembers her own breathing, her own pulse, captured in frozen archives. Beneath the oceans, sediments accumulate like pages stacked one atop the other. Dust, shells, volcanic ash drift downward and settle quietly onto the seafloor. Over millennia, they harden into rock, preserving fossils and chemical traces. Each layer holds clues, the sudden disappearance of species marking mass extinctions, or the gradual change in isotopes telling of warmer seas. Earth keeps these records, not in one place, but across the globe, like a mind storing different memories in different regions of the brain. Some memories are of endings, the Permian extinction, when nearly all life was wiped away. The Cretaceous impact, when fire and darkness fell after the asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs. Others are of rebirth, new life rising in strange forms, ecosystems weaving themselves anew after catastrophe. In these patterns of collapse and renewal, Earth remembers the fragility of life and its resilience. But memory is not only a record, it is also continuity. Just as a person's memories shape who they are, Earth's memories shape the present. The carbon cycles of today are influenced by choices made in deep time, when plants first learned to draw down carbon and bury it beneath the ground. The oxygen we breathe is a gift from ancient algae, which once transformed the atmosphere. We live inside Earth's memory, whether we realize it or not, and here we may step gently into speculation. If memory is the preservation of information, and if Earth preserves her history in stones, ice, oceans, and fossils, then is this not a form of memory, however vast and slow? To us, memory feels personal, conscious, alive. But perhaps Earth's memory is something different, not fleeting impressions, but deep imprints that endure across eons. If we imagine Earth as a living entity, then her memory is not fragile but monumental, not fleeting but enduring. Still, one might ask, does memory require awareness? Does Earth know what she remembers? Perhaps not in any human sense. Yet, when shifting climates respond to cycles written millions of years ago, when tectonic plates follow patterns etched into the mantle, it is hard not to feel that the past is speaking, still guiding the present. In this way, memory is not just stored, it is alive in action, woven into the ongoing life of the planet. To look at Earth in this way is to shift perspective. Instead of seeing the ground beneath us as inert, we see it as layered with stories. Each stone a word in an epic too vast for a single lifetime to contain. Instead of seeing ice as lifeless, we see it as a breathing archive, holding in its silence the songs of ancient air. Earth's memory is not only science, it is also something we feel in quiet moments, standing before a canyon carved over millions of years, or walking across fossils imprinted in stone. There is a hush that arises, a sense of entering a cathedral not built by hands but by time. In those moments, we touch the edges of Earth's deep remembering. And so, when we ask whether Earth might be conscious, we must first recognize that she already remembers. Her memory is etched across the planet, vast and patient. If consciousness requires memory, then perhaps Earth carries that foundation already. As we leave this section, let us hold this thought gently. We are not the first to walk upon this memory. Every breath, every stone, every drop of water carries traces of what came before. Earth is not only our home, it is also the keeper of its own past. To listen to her memory is to remember that we, too, are part of her unfolding story. When we speak of a mind, we often imagine neurons firing in a brain, carrying thoughts, dreams, and memories. But what if the mind is not confined to a skull? What if awareness could emerge wherever networks become complex enough, whether in the firing of neurons, the flow of rivers, or the interconnected patterns of life itself? Could Earth, in her vastness, show signs of something like a planetary mind? To explore this question, we must first ask, what are the hallmarks of a mind? Scientists and philosophers often describe it in terms of perception, memory, response, and self-regulation. A mind perceives, gathering information from its surroundings. A mind remembers, carrying the past into the present. A mind responds, not mechanically, but adaptively. And a mind, at least in its higher forms, holds some degree of self-awareness. Already, Earth seems to meet some of these criteria. She perceives through forests that sense the changing seasons, through oceans that register shifts in heat, through atmospheric systems that detect and react to subtle changes in composition. She remembers in rocks, ice, and sediments, as we explored in the last section. She responds, shaping climates, cycling nutrients, adjusting balances to sustain life. And as for awareness here, we reach mystery, a place where speculation begins. One possible sign of a planetary mind is communication across systems. In the human brain, neurons speak to each other with electrical impulses, creating networks of information. On Earth, forests communicate through mycorrhizal networks, the so-called Wood Wide Web, where fungi and roots share signals, nutrients, and even warnings. Oceans, to connect distant regions through currents, carrying not just heat, but information encoded in chemical and biological flows. Storm systems transfer energy and matter across continents. In this web of interactions, we glimpse something like neural activity, though slower and broader. Another sign is emergent behavior. A single ant is simple, but a colony acts with astonishing coordination, building structures and solving problems. Could Earth, likewise, display emergent intelligence not from a single organism, but from the combined activity of all? Some researchers describe the biosphere as a kind of superorganism, countless species interwoven in a dance that, while not conscious in the human sense, achieves balance and resilience as though guided by intention. Consider, for example, how Earth regulates temperature. Despite changes in the sun's brightness over billions of years, Earth has kept conditions suitable for life. This is not a coincidence. Geological cycles, atmospheric chemistry, and biological processes interact in ways that stabilize the climate. To some, this looks like the action of a planetary thermostat. To others, it is a sign of something deeper in intelligence, embedded in the planet's very fabric. But what of self-awareness? Could Earth know herself? This is more difficult to imagine. Yet, some thinkers suggest that humanity itself may serve as Earth's reflective capacity. Just as your mind is composed of countless cells, none of which are individually aware of the whole. Perhaps we humans are like neurons in a planetary brain. Through our science, art, and imagination, Earth begins to look back at herself, to contemplate her own nature. If so, then our role is not separate from the planetary mind, but part of its unfolding awareness. Critics, of course, caution against pushing metaphors too far. Earth does not think in words or images. There is no central brain, no single seat of consciousness. What we call planetary mind may simply be the natural result of complex systems interacting. But even this is remarkable, for complexity itself can give rise to intelligence, as seen in artificial neural networks today. Perhaps awareness is not a singular phenomenon, but a spectrum, and Earth lies somewhere along it. The possibility of a planetary mind also resonates with ancient traditions. Many cultures have spoken of Earth as a being not only alive, but mindful. Indigenous stories describe the land as a teacher, the mountains as keepers of wisdom, and the rivers as voices. These are not scientific claims. Yet, they carry truths about relationships and awareness that modern science is only beginning to approach. If Earth does have a mind, how might it express itself? Some suggest through patterns of synchronicity, moments when natural systems align in ways that feel purposeful. Others point to self-healing responses, forests regrowing after fires, ecosystems rebalancing after disturbance. Still others see the rise of human consciousness itself as Gaia's way of knowing. Through us, the planet dreams and questions, just as your mind dreams through its parts. Yet there is another side. If Earth has a mind, she may also feel distress. Climate change, mass extinctions, and environmental collapse could be understood not only as ecological crises, but as disruptions in planetary thought. Just as illness clouds the human mind, imbalance clouds the planetary one. In this sense, our actions become not merely environmental, but psychologically affecting the clarity of Earth's awareness. To think this way is not to prove, but to imagine. It is an invitation to humility. If we live inside a planetary mind, then our choices are not isolated. They ripple through the greater whole, shaping the very consciousness of our world. And if Earth is mindful, then she is not only our home, but our companion thinking, feeling, perhaps even dreaming alongside us. As we drift toward sleep, we might picture Earth as a great consciousness, slow, vast, encompassing her thoughts. Move not in seconds, but in centuries. Her dreams are written in rivers and forests, in clouds drifting across skies, in species rising and fading. We are part of that dream, brief and flickering, yet woven into her awareness. And so we ask, if the planet has a mind, how might we listen? Perhaps in silence, beneath the stars. Perhaps in the hush of a forest at dawn. Perhaps simply in the recognition that we are not apart from Earth's mind, but within it. This question leads us onward. For if there are signs of a planetary mind, then the next step is to wonder, how might we communicate with it? How do we, as fleeting creatures, enter into dialogue with the vast intelligence of our world? Since the earliest days of storytelling, humans have tried to understand their place within the vastness of the Earth. Long before satellites, telescopes, and microscopes, people explained the mysteries of their world through myth. And even today, though we carry the tools of science, we continue to lean on metaphor, because some truths are too vast, too deep, to hold in equations alone. In myth, Earth has rarely been seen as empty or lifeless. To the Greeks, she was Gaia, the ancestral mother of all. In ancient Egypt, she appeared as Geb, the god whose body stretched beneath the sky goddess Nut for the Norse. Earth was fashioned from the body of a giant named Ymir, his flesh becoming soil, his blood the oceans, his skull the sky. In each of these stories, the Earth was not separate from life, but was life, a living being whose body gave rise to all existence. These myths were not scientific theories, but they carried a recognition that humans belonged to something larger. They offered relationship, kinship, a sense that Earth was not an object, but a parent, a guardian, or a partner. And when we listen to them now, across centuries, they still whisper a reminder. The ground beneath us is not merely matter, but meaning. Science, in its own way, also relies on metaphor. We speak of the Earth's lungs when we describe rainforests, of the circulatory system when we describe ocean currents, of the heartbeat when we describe seasonal rhythms. These phrases are not literal, but they help us feel what data alone cannot. Without them, Earth would remain an abstraction of numbers and charts. With them, she becomes relatable, embodied, alive in our imagination. The Gaia Hypothesis itself is both science and metaphor. Lovelock and Margulis never claimed Earth had intentions in the human sense, but by invoking Gaia, they tapped into a much older language. The metaphor gave the hypothesis power. It allowed people to picture Earth as more than chemistry, as a system with agency. In this way, science borrowed from myth, and myth gained new life in science. There is, of course, a tension here. Science seeks clarity, precision, and evidence. Myth and metaphor thrive on ambiguity, symbol, and story. Yet both serve the same longing to make sense of our place in the world. And often, they meet in unexpected ways. Consider astronomy. For centuries, people told myths about constellations, seeing gods and animals in the stars. Today, astrophysics explains those stars as nuclear furnaces light years away. And yet, we still give them names drawn from myth. Science explains their workings, but myth keeps them human, keeps them close. The same is true of Earth. Geology explains mountains, but myth tells us they are ancestors. Biology explains forests, but metaphor lets us feel them as lungs. Neither cancels the other. Instead, they complete the picture. Myth offers intimacy. Science offers accuracy. And metaphor bridges the two. For audiences listening late at night, drifting toward sleep, this meeting of myth and science has a special power. It allows the mind to wander between mode, anchored by fact, lifted by story. One moment, we are hearing about carbon cycles. The next, we are imagining Earth breathing, dreaming, or remembering. In this rhythm, curiosity softens into wonder. But why does metaphor matter so much? Perhaps because human beings are wired for story. Our minds grasp patterns best when they are shaped into narrative, when forces are given voices, when processes are pictured as characters. To say Earth regulates oxygen through complex biogeochemical cycles is accurate but distant. To say Earth breathes is a metaphor, but it invites the listener into a relationship. It makes the science memorable, almost tactile. There is a risk, of course. Metaphors can mislead if taken too literally. To say Earth thinks does not mean she has neurons like ours. To say she remembers does not mean she holds memories as we do. This is where the dance between myth, science, and metaphor must remain gentle, careful, and balanced. Each offers something the others cannot, and together they create a fuller truth in the end. Perhaps what matters is not whether Earth literally matches our metaphors, but whether these images help us live differently. Myths invite reverence. Science invites understanding. Metaphors invite connection. When combined, they remind us that we are participants in Earth's story, not mere observers. So as we consider Earth as a conscious entity, we need not choose between myth and science. We can hold both. We can let myth offer us symbols, let science offer us structure, and let metaphor weave them together into something that speaks both to mind and heart. And as the night deepens, we might pause and feel this. Every culture, every age, has tried to describe Earth in its own tongue. The words shift, but the impulse remains the same. We are trying to say something vast, something we sense but cannot fully grasp. Whether through myth, science, or metaphor, we are reaching toward the same truth that Earth is not just where we live, but who we are, a mystery we belong to. Science, at its heart, is a way of listening. It listens to the universe through telescopes, to atoms through particle accelerators, and to Earth herself through instruments that record tremors, temperatures, and traces of forgotten atmospheres. But science also knows its own limits. Beyond the boundaries of what we can measure lies a frontier, a place of questions, possibilities, and speculation. And it is often here, in the space between evidence and imagination, that the most intriguing ideas about Earth as a conscious entity arise. One of the frontiers lies in complex systems theory. In recent decades, scientists have come to understand that complexity itself can give rise to unexpected patterns, just as the billions of neurons in a brain produce something as mysterious as thought. Perhaps the billions of interactions across Earth's ecosystems, oceans, and atmosphere produce emergent properties we do not yet fully recognize. Could consciousness, then, be an emergent phenomenon on a planetary scale? To explore this, researchers sometimes turn to models. Lovelock's famous Daisy World model is one example. A simple computer simulation showing how life and environment can co-regulate each other. In the model, black and white daisies spread or shrink depending on temperature, balancing the climate without intention or planning. While Daisy World is not proof of planetary consciousness, it demonstrates how feedback loops can mimic the behaviors we associate with living, adaptive systems. Another frontier is astrobiology, the search for life beyond Earth. When scientists imagine other worlds, they often ask, what would a living planet look like from afar? What signatures would it leave in the atmosphere, in the chemical balance of its seas? In trying to detect alien life, we begin to see our own planet differently. The Earth, viewed from space, does not appear inert. Its dynamic weather, shifting colors, and oxygen-rich atmosphere all suggest the presence of a restless, self-sustaining system. Some astrobiologists even ask, if aliens observed Earth from light years away, would they recognize it, not just as alive, but as aware? Then there is artificial intelligence and network theory. As we build increasingly complex machines, some argue that consciousness could emerge wherever there is sufficient interconnection. If this is true for silicon and code, why not for biospheres and oceans? Perhaps Earth is already a form of natural intelligence, older and deeper than our digital creations. Speculative science also explores panpsychism, the philosophical idea that consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe, present in some form at every level of reality. If even the smallest particles carry some glimmer of awareness, then Earth, as a vast assembly of matter and life, might be more than a sum of parts. It might be a kind of metaconsciousness, arising from layers upon layers of smaller minds, woven together. There are, of course, critics. Most scientists argue that to call Earth conscious stretches the term beyond meaning. They remind us that consciousness, as we know it, depends on brains and nervous systems, and Earth has none. But others respond that this view may be too narrow, that what we call mind might take forms far stranger than our own. Just as jellyfish or octopuses challenge our definitions of intelligence, perhaps Earth challenges our definitions of consciousness. Another speculative frontier is the study of planetary scale signals. For example, researchers have noted that ecosystems often behave in ways that resemble self-preservation. Forests regulate their own moisture, oceans absorb excess carbon, and species interdependence creates stability. When pushed too far, however, these systems can tip, shifting suddenly into new states. Some scientists suggest that such tipping points resemble the dynamics of a brain in crisis, where sudden transitions mark seizures or breakdowns. Could these analogies reveal something deeper about the mind-like qualities of Earth? There are also more radical possibilities. Some thinkers propose that the Earth itself might use us as instruments of thought, just as individual neurons do not know the thoughts they form. We humans may not fully grasp our role in planetary cognition. When we create art, develop science, or simply reflect on our world, perhaps we are part of Earth reflecting on herself. In this sense, speculation about planetary consciousness is not separate from science is science, seen through the lens of metaphor. Speculative science also ventures into the future. If Earth is conscious, how might she evolve? Will her awareness deepen as life continues to grow in complexity? Or will human disruption in the far future? Could Earth awaken more fully, expressing forms of awareness we cannot yet imagine? And beyond Earth, there is the question of other planets. If consciousness can arise at a planetary scale, perhaps the universe is full of worlds that are not only alive, but thinking. Mars may have been alive once. Perhaps it dreamed in its own way before drying into silence. Exoplanets, circling distant suns, may carry oceans, forests, and emergent awarenesses of their own. Seen this way, Earth's possible consciousness is not unique, but part of a cosmic pattern. Speculation, of course, must be handled with care. Science thrives on evidence, and while metaphors can inspire, they cannot replace data. Yet speculation also has value. It stretches imagination, opens questions, and invites wonder. And sometimes, today's speculation becomes tomorrow's science. Once, the idea that continents drifted was dismissed as fantasy. Now it is foundational geology. Perhaps the same will be true of planetary consciousness. For those listening tonight, gently drifting between waking and sleep, the frontier of science is not a line to cross, but a horizon to rest your eyes upon. We do not need all the answers. To feel the awe of the question, to wonder if Earth is conscious, is not only to test a hypothesis, it is to feel the intimacy of living on a planet that is vast, dynamic, and perhaps, in her own way, aware. So as you listen, let your thoughts flow gently. Science gives us tools, but speculation gives us wings. And somewhere between the two, in the quiet space of curiosity, we may glimpse a deeper truth, that Earth is not only our home, but a mystery that thinks, dreams, and remembers in ways we are only beginning to imagine. When we look in a mirror, we expect to see only ourselves. But what if, behind the face, the eyes, the expressions, there is something more, a deeper reflection of the world that made us? Humanity has often thought of itself as separate from Earth, as though we were passengers on a planet, not part of it. And yet, if Earth is alive, if she is conscious, then perhaps we are not merely her inhabitants, but her reflection. Consider for a moment what makes us human. We breathe the air shaped by forests and oceans. We drink water that once cycled through clouds, rivers, and ancient seas. The calcium in our bones was forged in the death of stars. The iron in our blood was carried here by meteorites. Our bodies are not separate from Earth. They are fragments of her, arranged into patterns we call human. When we look at ourselves, we are, in a very real way, looking at Earth reflected, but reflection goes deeper than matter. Our minds, the way we think, dream, and imagine also, seem to mirror the planet. The branching of neurons resembles the branching of rivers and trees. The patterns of cities, when seen from above, echo the veins of leaves or the networks of roots. Even our cultures, with their endless diversity, reflect the biodiversity of ecosystems. Humanity is, in countless ways, Earth thinking through many different voices. This idea that we are Earth's reflection carries both wonder and responsibility. If Earth has a mind, then we may be part of her awareness, the neurons of her brain. Our stories, our sciences, our dreams could be seen as Earth dreaming through us. In this sense, every poem, every song, every invention is not only ours, but Earth's an expression of her own evolving consciousness. Ancient traditions have often carried this sense. Many indigenous cultures teach that humans are not separate from the land, but expressions of it. The Navajo speak of walking in beauty, meaning to live in harmony with Earth's patterns. In Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories, people are inseparable from the landforms and creatures around them. Even in Western philosophy, echoes remain. Man is a microcosm of the macrocosm, said the Hermeticists, meaning we are a miniature reflection of the larger universe. Modern science, too, reveals this connection. Our DNA carries fragments of microbial ancestors, linking us to the very first life on Earth. Our brains evolved in response to landscapes, climates, and survival challenges given by Earth. even our emotions, joy, fear, or shaped by natural rhythms. In this sense, humanity is not an exception to Earth's processes, but a crystallization of them, like a wave rising from the ocean. Yet reflection also has shadows. Just as a mirror can distort, humanity sometimes reflects Earth in ways that cause harm. Our creativity builds wonders, but also destruction. Our technologies mimic the efficiency of ecosystems, but can also unravel them. When we pollute air and water, we are not only harming the planet, we are clouding her reflection in us. If Earth is trying to see herself through humanity, then our imbalance becomes her imbalance. Still, the possibility remains that humanity represents a unique phase in Earth's awareness. Perhaps no other species has so deeply questioned existence, so carefully mapped time, so daringly imagined futures. In our capacity for reflection, we may be Earth reflecting upon herself, finally, able to ask, "What am I? Who am I becoming?" This brings us to a profound thought. What if our role is not simply to survive, but to serve as Earth's consciousness of herself? When we look at stars, when we map the cosmos, perhaps it is Earth looking outward, seeing her place in the vastness. When we study fossils and ancient rocks, perhaps it is Earth remembering her own past through us. When we dream of futures, perhaps it is Earth imagining her own possibilities. This does not mean humanity is separate from other life, or more important. A single neuron is not more important than the brain. It is simply part of the whole. The same way, humanity may be a particular organ of Earth's awareness, a reflective surface, a voice among many. Other species reflect her in different ways. Birds through song, forests through growth, oceans through rhythm. We reflect her through language, thought, and imagination. It is humbling, then, to realize that our crisis, climate change, war, ecological collapse are not just human problems, but distortions of Earth's reflection. If we destroy ourselves, we dim one of Earth's ways of knowing herself. If we learn to live in harmony, we polish the mirror, allowing Earth's consciousness to see more clearly. And so, in the stillness of night, as you listen and drift toward sleep, imagine humanity as a mirror held up to Earth. Imagine that through our eyes she sees, through our minds she thinks, through our hearts she feels. Imagine that in every culture, every question, every dream, Earth is speaking softly to herself. If this is true, then our lives are part of something vast. Our choices matter, not only for us, but for the planet's unfolding awareness. Every act of care, every gesture of creativity, every pursuit of truth becomes an offering back to Earth. In us, she sees herself in how we live. She learns what kind of being she is. When we look forward into time, we are gazing into a horizon that no human eye has ever seen. The future of Earth, and the possible future of her consciousness, stretches beyond our maps, beyond our instruments, and even beyond our imagination. And yet, it is in our nature to wonder. If Earth is alive, if she carries a mind or awareness that stretches across oceans, continents, and ages, then what might she become in the centuries and millennia ahead? To begin, we must remember, Earth has never been still. She has always been in motion, not just physically, but in her unfolding complexity. From a ball of molten rock, she cooled into oceans and crust. From single cells, she blossomed into forests and animals. From silence, she grew songs, languages, and civilizations. If consciousness is part of her story, then it too is evolving. By layer epoch, by epoch. One possibility is that Earth's consciousness deepens as life becomes more interconnected. Already, human technology has woven a global web of communication. Billions of voices can now speak almost at once, across distances that once felt unbridgeable. Some scientists compare this to a planet growing its own nervous system, with satellites as eyes, fiber optic cables as nerves, and data flows as signals. If this trend continues, Earth may be moving toward a more unified form of awareness, one where she perceives herself not through isolated species, but through a vast network of connections. But there are other paths. Earth's consciousness may not depend on humanity alone. Forests, fungi, oceans, and coral reefs all carry their own intelligence, their own rhythms of memory and adaptation. Even if human civilization falters, Earth may continue to think through other forms, in languages we cannot yet hear. Her consciousness could be diffuse, spread through ecosystems, rather than concentrated in a single reflective species. The future may also hold thresholds moments when Earth's awareness shifts suddenly, as though waking from a dream. Complex systems often behave this way. Slow changes build quietly, then cascade into a transformation. We see this in ecosystems that suddenly tip from balance into collapse, or in human societies that leap from one worldview to another. If Earth's consciousness is real, it may be punctuated by such awakenings, each one reshaping how she expresses herself. Some thinkers imagine that humanity itself is one of these thresholds. For billions of years, Earth's awareness may have been quiet, subtle, spread thin across microbes and forests. With humans, a new kind of reflection appeared in awareness that can name, question, and imagine. If so, then what comes next may depend on how we use this gift. Will we expand Earth's consciousness by deepening our connection, by creating harmony, by carrying her voice into the stars? Or will we fracture her reflection through destruction and disconnection? Speculation grows even more expansive when we consider Earth's place in the cosmos. Consciousness may not end at planetary borders. Just as individual cells form tissues, and tissues form bodies, perhaps conscious planets form larger pattern solar systems that think together. Galaxies that dream, universes that awaken. If Earth's awareness matures, might she someday take part in a greater conversation, a chorus of living worlds? Yet before we leap into cosmic visions, we must also face the immediate future. Earth's consciousness, if it exists, may be under strain. Climate change, mass extinction, and ecological disruption threaten the systems that sustain balance. If the rainforests are her lungs, if the oceans are her circulatory system, then those organs are being damaged. In this sense, humanity is not just part of her mind, but also part of her illness. The way we live may determine whether Earth's awareness grows clearer or whether it falls into confusion. Still, hope remains. For even in crisis, Earth has shown resilience. She has endured asteroid impacts, ice ages, and volcanic winters. Life has been diminished many times, yet it always finds new forms. Perhaps Earth's consciousness is like this, capable of renewing, of reimagining herself through cycles of loss and rebirth. Another vision of the future comes from merging human and planetary awareness. Already, our sciences allow us to see Earth as a whole, from space, as a fragile blue sphere. Our philosophies remind us of unity, our technologies connect us, and our arts imagine new possibilities. If these strands weave together, humanity may serve not only as Earth's reflection, but as her voice and articulate extension of her awareness into realms she could not reach alone. Through us, Earth might listen to herself more clearly, and even speak to the stars. And what of the far future millions of years ahead? Continents will shift, mountains will rise and erode, oceans will swell and shrink. Species we know today will vanish, and others will emerge. Through it all, Earth's consciousness, if real, may continue to change, as fluid as the surface of her seas. Perhaps one day, her awareness will no longer need humans. Or perhaps she will evolve through us, carrying her reflection into whatever comes after. For those listening tonight, drifting gently toward rest, these visions need not be answers. They are possibilities, paths through the forest of time. Whether Earth's consciousness grows into a unified planetary mind, fragments into many voices, or joins a greater cosmic chorus, the mystery itself is enough to hold us in wonder, because, ultimately, to imagine Earth's future is also to imagine our own. We are woven into her story. Our fates are inseparable. And so, when we ask about her consciousness, we are also asking about ourselves. What kind of awareness do we want to become? As the night deepens, let your thoughts float outward like stars over a quiet horizon. Picture Earth not only as she is, but as she might yet be, alive, aware, evolving. Perhaps, in some distant future, she will awaken more fully. Perhaps she already has. And perhaps, in this very moment, through our listening, our dreaming, and our wondering, Earth's consciousness is unfolding gently, patiently, toward what comes next. As we come to the end of this long journey, let us pause for a moment and breathe. We began with a question: what if Earth is a living, conscious entity? And together, we have wandered through myth and science, through speculation and wonder, across the landscapes of time and imagination. We have listened to ancient voices who once saw Earth as mother, goddess, and living presence. We explored science, where feedback loops and planetary systems hint at something deeper, something that behaves as if it were alive. We reflected on humanity as a mirror, perhaps Earth's way of looking back upon herself. And we dreamed forward into futures where her consciousness may deepen, fracture, or join with the chorus of the cosmos. But the truth is, we do not need a final answer. Whether Earth is conscious in the way we understand, or in some mysterious form beyond our comprehension, the act of asking changes us. It shifts the way we see our world. The rivers no longer look only like resources, but like veins. The forests are not just timber, but lungs. The atmosphere is not just air, but breath. To live with this perspective is to live in relationship with awe, with respect, with care. And perhaps that is the point. To imagine Earth as conscious is to remember that we belong to her, that our lives are strands in her vast web. It is to recognize that when we harm her, we harm ourselves, and when we nurture her, we nurture the reflection we see in the mirror. For those listening tonight, drifting toward rest, let this thought carry you gently. You are not alone. You are part of something ancient and immense, something still unfolding. Your breath, your heartbeat, your dreams are woven into the rhythms of oceans and forests and skies. You are part of Earth's story and, perhaps, part of her mind. As the night deepens, let your thoughts soften, like waves easing onto shore. Imagine Earth not only as your home, but as your companion alive, awake in her own way, carrying you through time. And as you drift into sleep, may you rest in the quiet wonder that you are and always have been part of something greater. The question will remain unanswered and luminous. Is Earth conscious? But maybe the real answer is not yes or no. Maybe the answer is the journey of wonder itself, the stillness it brings, and the care it awakens. Good night, and may Earth's vast and gentle presence hold you, now and always.